When your child doesn't come home, time stops. The coffee goes cold, the clock ticks louder, and every passing minute becomes another heartbeat of fear. My son disappeared for 2 weeks. No calls, no texts, no explanation, just silence. The kind of silence that eats you alive, 1 second at a time. At first, I told myself he was fine. Maybe he needed space. Maybe he was just busy, tired of me checking in. But by the fourth day, the excuses stopped making sense. Mothers know. We can feel it deep in our bones, that pull of panic when something isn't right. I called everyone, his friends, his boss, even the woman he'd been seeing. No one knew anything. His phone went straight to voicemail, his apartment untouched. It was as if he'd vanished into thin air. But the strangest part? There were no police updates, no clues, no ransom notes. Nothing. Just an unbearable emptiness in every corner of my house and the sound of my own voice whispering his name at night. Then, on the 14th day, he walked through the door. No warning, no apology, just there, standing in the same kitchen where I'd prayed for his safety. His eyes looked hollow, darker somehow. He smelled like rain and dust, and his hands shook when he reached for a glass of water. "Where were you?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just said, "I'm tired," and went to his room. And that was it. As if 2 weeks of disappearance could be erased by a nap. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but something in his face, a kind of quiet torment, stopped me. I'd seen that expression before, on his father, before everything fell apart. For the next few days, I watched him. He barely ate, barely spoke. He stayed locked in his room, curtains drawn, light flickering through the cracks of the door like a secret breathing beneath it. One night, while cleaning, I noticed something odd. A faint trail of dirt on the hallway floor leading from his shoes to his bedroom. It wasn't city dirt. It smelled like earth, damp and raw. And then there was the smell. Not strong, but faint, metallic like rust or blood. That's when I decided to look. He was out again that night, saying he needed air. My hands trembled as I pushed open his bedroom door. The air felt heavy, stale. His bed was unmade, his desk cluttered with papers and half-burned candles. But when I knelt to pick up a fallen shirt, my fingers brushed against something under the bed. Cold, hard, and out of place. I pulled it out slowly, and in that moment, I realized I didn't just want answers anymore. I was terrified to find them. What I found under my son's bed changed everything I thought I knew about him, about the person he'd become, about the secrets he'd been carrying long before he vanished. It wasn't just an object, it was a confession. And from that night on, I couldn't look at my son the same way again. Before my son vanished, our house still sounded alive. There was laughter, footsteps, the hum of late-night television, and the occasional clatter of dishes when he forgot to wash up. It wasn't perfect. We argued, we disagreed, we grew silent more often than we should have, but there was still warmth, the kind of warmth only a mother's love can hold, even when it's fraying at the edges. Ethan had always been my quiet child. Even as a boy, he was the one who'd rather draw by the window than play outside, who'd whisper instead of shout. He was gentle, thoughtful, the kind of son every mother prays for. But somewhere between his teenage years and adulthood, that gentleness hardened. It started small. Missed calls, short answers, a shadow in his eyes when I asked about his day. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I'd smothered him. Maybe I'd become that kind of mother who loves too loudly and listens too little. His father used to say I worried too much. But how could I not? A mother's instinct is both her curse and her compass. After his father died, a heart attack that came too soon, too cruelly, Ethan changed. He was 17 then. I remember the way he stood by the casket, jaw clenched, tears refusing to fall. That day, something inside him broke, and I didn't know how to fix it. For years after, I tried everything to fill the silence he left behind. I cooked his favorite meals. I asked about work, his friends, his dreams. But he always said the same thing. "I'm fine, Mom." Those words became a wall between us. He worked odd jobs for a while: delivery driver, warehouse assistant, tech repair, nothing long term. Every time I asked about his plans, he'd shrug and say, "I'll figure it out." I told myself he just needed time to grieve, to grow, to find his way. But time, I've learned, can be a dangerous thing. It doesn't always heal. Sometimes it hides what's festering. The real change began about 3 months before he disappeared. He started coming home late, sometimes not at all. When he did, his clothes smelled like smoke and iron, his eyes glassy and distant. He stopped eating dinner with me, stopped sitting in the living room. Even the sound of my voice seemed to irritate him. Once I knocked on his door after midnight, hearing faint murmurs from inside, like he was talking to someone, but when I called his name, the sound stopped. The next morning, I asked who it was. He said, "Just a friend," and walked away before I could ask more. Another time, I found a torn piece of paper on the kitchen counter, an address scribbled in his handwriting, with the words, "Don't forget the box," beside it. I didn't ask what it meant. I should have. There were other signs, too. Small things that only a mother would notice. He started locking his bedroom door. He flinched when I touched his shoulder. His hands, once soft and steady, became rough, calloused, as if from digging or lifting something heavy. I'd hear him pacing at night, his footsteps restless and uneven, like someone haunted by thoughts they couldn't silence. Then one morning, I woke up to find his room empty. His wallet gone, his phone charger left behind, his bed half made, as if he'd planned to come back but never did. At first, I didn't panic. I told myself he needed space. Maybe he'd gone on a trip, stayed with friends. But by the second night, when he still hadn't called, the fear began to bloom like poison in my chest. I went to the police on the third day. They took down his name, his photo, and my trembling statement, but their faces were calm, detached, as if my missing son was just another case on their list. "Adults disappear all the time," one officer said kindly. "He'll come back." But they didn't know my son. They didn't know the way he used to whisper, "Good night, Mom," through the door when he thought I was asleep. They didn't know that he hated leaving things unfinished, that he would never, ever leave without a word. Days turned into a blur of phone calls, sleepless nights, and prayers whispered to a God I wasn't sure was listening. I checked hospitals, shelters, even morgues. Every time the phone rang, my heart jumped to my throat. Every silence felt like punishment. Then came the small cruelties. The well-meaning neighbors, the whispered pity, the way people started avoiding my eyes at the grocery store. I became that woman, the one with the missing son, the one whose house felt haunted by hope. 2 weeks, that's how long it took. 14 days of fear, tears, and guilt. 14 nights of imagining the worst. 14 mornings waking up to the same untouched breakfast plate on the kitchen table. Until the 15th day, when I heard the sound of keys turning in the front door. I froze, my heart slamming against my ribs. It was him. My son walked in, pale, thinner, eyes hollow, as if the light inside him had gone out. I wanted to rush into his arms, but something in his face stopped me. There was no relief in his eyes, no apology, just a cold detachment that sent a chill through me. "Ethan," I whispered, tears spilling down my cheeks. "Where have you been?" He looked at me for a long moment, then said in a voice I barely recognized, "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." Then he walked past me and closed his door. That was the moment I realized. My son had returned home, but the boy I'd raised never came back. And soon, I'd learn why. The morning after Ethan came back felt like walking through a dream, the kind that presses heavy on your chest where you can't tell if you've woken up or fallen deeper asleep. He didn't speak much that day. He barely ate. He stayed in his room with the curtains drawn, and every sound, every creak of the floor, every whisper of the wind made him flinch. At first, I told myself he was just tired, traumatized, maybe. Whatever I'd kept him away for 2 weeks had clearly left a mark. His face was pale, his lips cracked, his eyes shadowed by sleeplessness. There was dirt beneath his nails, faint bruises around his wrists, but what frightened me most was his silence. When I asked him where he'd been, he'd shrug. When I asked if someone had hurt him, he'd shake his head. When I asked if he needed help, he'd whisper, "Please just drop it, Mom." Drop it. The 2 words I'd never thought I'd hear from my own child. That evening, I made his favorite. Roast chicken, the way I used to when he was little. The smell filled the house, warm and nostalgic, but he didn't come out of his room. I knocked twice before opening the door. The curtains were still closed. The only light came from his desk lamp, flickering faintly. He was sitting on the floor, knees pulled to his chest, staring at something, a small wooden box resting beside him. When he noticed me, he quickly shoved it under his bed. "Ethan," I said softly, "I made dinner." He didn't look up. "I'm not hungry." His voice was hollow, not angry, just emptied. Like someone who'd forgotten how to feel. I wanted to ask about the box, but I didn't. Not yet. That night, as I washed dishes, I kept thinking about it. I remembered that note I'd found weeks ago. "Don't forget the box." The words returned to me now, echoing like a riddle I hadn't solved. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. Over the next few days, his behavior grew stranger. He avoided eye contact. He jumped at sudden noises. He kept his door locked, even when he was home. Sometimes I'd hear him talking to himself, whispering in low, urgent tones, as if arguing with someone I couldn't see. Once I woke up in the middle of the night and found him standing in the hallway, staring at the front door, completely still. When I asked him what he was doing, he muttered, "Just checking if it's locked." Then he went back to his room without another word.
The mother in me wanted to reach out, to hold him, to comfort him, but every time I tried, it felt like touching glass, fragile, cold, ready to shatter. I started searching for answers quietly, in the only way I knew how, through the small traces he left behind. His laundry, for instance. I noticed that one of his shirts had faint reddish stains on the cuffs. Not quite blood, not quite dirt. Another had a tear near the sleeve as if it had caught on something sharp. In his pockets, I found a small key, old, rusty, with no label. When I asked about it, he snapped, "Don't go through my things," and slammed his door so hard the frame rattled. That was the first time he'd raised his voice at me in years. I spent that night crying quietly into my pillow, wondering if I'd lost him for good. But mothers, real mothers, don't give up, even when the world tells them to stop asking questions. Their hearts refuse to listen.
And so, one afternoon, while he was out, I did something I never thought I would. I entered his room. The air felt thick, stale. The curtains hadn't been opened in days. The faint smell of earth clung to everything, like soil after rain, mixed with something metallic. His desk was covered in papers, sketches, maps, numbers scrawled in the margins. Some pages looked torn from notebooks, others smeared with fingerprints. But it was his bed that drew my attention. I remembered the way he'd hidden that box beneath it. I kneeled down slowly, my heart pounding so loudly it felt deafening. At first, I couldn't see much, just shadows. But as my eyes adjusted, I noticed a dark corner near the leg of the bed. Something was there. I reached under, my fingers brushing against cold wood. It was the box. A small, hand-carved wooden box with a brass latch, the kind you might find at an antique market. The lid was scratched, as if someone had tried to pry it open before. For a moment, I hesitated. My hands trembled. Every motherly instinct screamed not to invade his privacy. But another voice, quieter, firmer, whispered, "You deserve to know." When I lifted the latch, it creaked softly. Inside were photos. Dozens of them. At first glance, they looked ordinary. Pictures of trees, dirt roads, fields. But then I saw one that made my stomach twist. It was a photo of Ethan, taken from behind. He was standing in front of a rundown shack, half hidden by weeds. Someone else had taken it. There were others, too. Blurry shots of a forest at night, tire tracks in mud, the corner of a metal fence. And then, near the bottom of the box, a piece of torn fabric, dark, stiff, with what looked like dried blood on it. My hands went cold. Before I could process what I was seeing, I heard the front door creak open. Panic shot through me. I shoved everything back into the box and pushed it under the bed. Seconds later, Ethan's footsteps approached the hallway. "Mom?" he called. I forced my voice to sound calm. "In the kitchen." He paused, then turned away. The sound of his door locking echoed like a verdict. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that wooden box, those photographs, the eerie stillness of that shack hidden among the trees. My son had always been a quiet boy, but never secretive, never this distant. By morning, my pillow was damp with tears and my heart had made its choice. I couldn't wait for the truth to find me. I had to go find it myself. When Ethan left the house that day, I watched from a window as he disappeared down the street. His hoodie pulled over his head, his shoulders hunched. I waited until his figure vanished around the corner before I went into his room again. The sunlight filtering through the curtains made everything look softer, almost innocent. But I knew better now. I took the box from under his bed and spread the photographs across the desk. This time I looked closer. The pictures weren't random. They were clues. Some had faint coordinates on the back. Others had dates, the same dates as the days he'd been missing. One picture showed an old signpost. The writing was faded, but I could just make out the words Willow Creek. That name sent a jolt through me. I remembered it vaguely. A small area on the edge of town, half abandoned, where my husband and I used to drive past when we were first married. It was quiet back then, almost forgotten. Why would my son go there? I took my coat, the box, and a deep breath, and I drove. Willow Creek was nothing like I remembered. The roads were cracked, the trees overgrown, and the air carried that strange heaviness that settles over places people stop caring about. As I drove further in, I passed broken mailboxes, rusted fences, and a single house with a for sale sign swinging lazily in the wind. My GPS gave up halfway there, so I followed instinct and the shapes in the photos. A crooked tree here, a dirt road bending left, a small wooden bridge over a dry creek. It all matched. And then, just as in one of the photos, I saw it. The shack. It sat hunched against the trees, its roof caving in, windows dark like empty eyes. The door was barely hanging by its hinges. I parked the car and got out, my breath catching in my throat. For a long moment, I just stood there, staring. Part of me wanted to turn back, call Ethan, pretend I hadn't seen anything. But another part, the mother in me, couldn't. Because love isn't about pretending not to see. It's about facing what terrifies you most. So I stepped forward. The ground crunched under my shoes. A bird screeched somewhere in the distance, making me jump. My fingers trembled as I reached for the door. It opened with a groan. Inside, dust danced in thin beams of light. The air smelt of damp wood and something metallic, faint but sharp. There was an old mattress on the floor, a few empty cans, a blanket rolled up in the corner. Someone had been here recently. And then I saw it. A photograph pinned to the wall. It was Ethan, standing exactly where I was now. My knees weakened. I had to grab the wall to steady myself. What was this place? What had he been doing here? Beneath the photo, something was scratched into the wood. I bent closer. The words were rough but legible. Forgive me. I froze. That handwriting, it was his, my son's. A rush of panic, fear, and heartbreak flooded at me all at once. I turned around, suddenly feeling watched, as though the trees outside had eyes. I backed away toward the door, my breath quickening. And that's when I heard it. A sound from behind the shack, faint, like something dragging across dirt. Ethan? I called instinctively. No answer. I moved to the back window and peeked out. There, half hidden in the weeds, was a small mound of disturbed earth, like something had been recently buried. My heart thundered painfully. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe the sheer need to know. Maybe the terror of not knowing. But I grabbed a piece of wood from the floor and started digging. The soil was soft, freshly turned. My hand shook so hard I could barely hold the stick. A few inches down, I hit something. Hard. It wasn't large. I scraped the dirt away until I could see what it was. A small metal box, rusted, locked. I lifted it carefully, brushing away the earth. It was heavier than it looked. My instincts screamed that I shouldn't open it, that this, whatever this was, wasn't meant for me. But I couldn't stop now. I found a rock, struck the lock, and it snapped open. Inside were papers, receipts, notes, a phone, old, cracked, the screen shattered but still faintly lit when I pressed the button. And then, beneath it all, a photograph. This one wasn't of landscapes or abandoned roads. It was of two boys, Ethan and another young man, smiling, their arms slung around each other's shoulders. Written on the back were just 3 words. We didn't mean to. I stumbled backward, my breath ragged. The truth was unraveling before me thread by painful thread. Who was this other boy? Why hadn't Ethan told me about him? I scrolled through the phone, and one message thread caught my eye. The same name over and over. Caleb. The last message was dated 2 weeks before Ethan disappeared. Ethan, please, we can't hide it forever. Someone's going to find out. By Caleb. The next message was from Ethan. I'll take care of it. No one will ever know. The world seemed to tilt beneath me. I clutched the box to my chest and stumbled out of the shack, gasping for air. The trees felt like they were closing in. The silence pressed down so hard it hurt. I drove home without remembering how. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel. That night, when Ethan came home, I watched him quietly from the kitchen. He looked exhausted, like someone who'd aged years in days. Where were you today? He asked suddenly. His tone wasn't curious, it was sharp, suspicious. I tried to keep my voice steady. Just running errands. He stared at me for a long time. Then his eyes flicked, just for a moment, toward his bedroom door. That's when I knew. He knew I'd been in his room. The tension between us stretched like wire. I could feel his anger simmering beneath the surface, but there was something else too. Fear. I wanted to ask him about Caleb, about the box, the phone, the words carved into that wall, but every question felt like a match near gasoline. So I waited. Later that night, I heard him moving around. Soft footsteps, drawers opening and closing. Then the sound of something being dragged. I crept to the hallway and peeked through the crack in his door. He was kneeling by the bed, holding the wooden box, the one I'd found earlier, and putting something inside. Then he whispered, so faintly I almost didn't hear it, "I'm sorry, Caleb." He shut the box and slid it back under the bed. I pressed a hand over my mouth, tears burning my eyes. Whatever he was hiding, whatever he had done, it wasn't out of cruelty. It was out of guilt, maybe grief, maybe love. But as I turned away, one thought anchored itself deep in my chest. Whatever truth lay buried, my son was being crushed beneath it. And if I didn't dig it up soon, it would destroy him completely. Sleep didn't visit me that night. The clock hands crawled, my heart pounding louder with every tick. Every time the wind brushed against the house, I flinched, imagining footsteps outside or a knock at the door. Ethan was in his room, silent, still, too still. I lay awake wondering how it had all come to this. Just a few months ago, he'd been my sweet, soft-spoken boy who used to leave sticky notes on the fridge saying, "Love you, Mom. Back by 6." Now I couldn't even tell if I knew him anymore. That name, Caleb, burned through every thought. By morning, I made my decision. I couldn't keep living in the dark. I started with his phone. Not Ethan's, Caleb's, the one I'd found buried behind that shack. The battery was dying, but it still worked. I opened the message app again, scrolling further up this time. Most of the texts were short, coded, like they were hiding something. Did you bring it? Meet me at Willow Creek, same time. We'll fix it, I promise. Then, one message stopped me cold. It wasn't supposed to happen. She wasn't supposed to get hurt. The timestamp was the night before Ethan vanished. I stared at the words until they blurred. She? Who was she? I needed answers, not guesses. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I went into Ethan's old social media pages. Scrolling through his photos, I found one from last spring. Ethan smiling beside another boy with messy brown hair and a crooked grin. The caption read, "Me and Caleb, partners in crime." I clicked Caleb's profile. His page was quiet now, no recent posts. But there, under old comments, was one from someone named Anna R. "I miss you every day, Caleb. Mom says you're in a better place, but I still see your bike near the bridge sometimes." My stomach dropped. In a better place. I clicked Hannah's profile, his sister, judging by her photos. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through. There were family pictures, Caleb, Hannah, their parents, and then, about 2 months ago, a memorial post. "Rest in peace, Caleb. Gone too soon, but never forgotten." I couldn't breathe. The date on the post matched the first day Ethan disappeared. I read it again and again, hoping I'd misunderstood, but I hadn't. Caleb was dead, and my son, my sweet, broken son, had been with him. I don't know how I drove to the address I found under their family's business listing. It was all muscle memory, keys, ignition, drive. My mind was somewhere else entirely. The house sat on a quiet street, white siding, a porch swing in the breeze. It was the kind of home that looked peaceful on the outside, the kind that hides heartbreak behind its curtains. A woman answered the door. She looked about my age, eyes rimmed with the kind of sorrow that never fades. "Yes?" she asked cautiously. "Are you Caleb's mother?" She stiffened. "Yes. Who's asking?" I swallowed hard. "My name's Margaret. My son was friends with him. Ethan." Her expression softened, just slightly. "Oh, Ethan." Her voice cracked around his name. "He used to come here all the time. They were inseparable." "I didn't know much about Caleb," I said gently. "Ethan never really talked about him. But I saw the post. I'm so sorry for your loss." Her eyes glistened. "Thank you." She hesitated. "Would you like to come in?" I nodded. Inside, the house smelled faintly of lavender and dust. Family photos lined the walls, birthdays, holidays, ordinary joy frozen in time. We sat in the living room. Her hands fidgeted in her lap. "They met at the community center," she began. "Both quiet kids, both carrying their own pain, I suppose." "What happened to him?" I asked softly. Her gaze dropped to her hands. "It was an accident. At least, that's what the police said." "An accident?" She nodded slowly. "They were out near the old quarry. No one knows why. Caleb fell. They found him the next morning." My breath hitched. And Ethan? She looked up then, eyes heavy with something between pity and confusion. He was there. He called it in. But when they questioned him, he barely said a word. Then, 2 days later, he disappeared. The room felt smaller suddenly, like the walls were closing in. I always wondered, what happened to him? She whispered. I thought maybe he just couldn't live with it. Guilt can do that to a person. I wanted to tell her the truth, or at least the fragments of it I'd found, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I reached across and took her hand. I think they both carried something heavy, something we'll never fully understand. Her lips trembled into a sad smile. Maybe. As I stood to leave, she handed me something, a photograph. Caleb and Ethan again, sitting on the hood of a car, laughing at something behind the camera. They were good boys. No matter what happened, don't let anyone tell you differently.
When I got home, Ethan was sitting at the kitchen table. His hoodie was gone, his hair a mess, his eyes red, like he'd been crying. "Where were you?" he asked quietly. "I went to see someone," I replied. "Someone who misses Caleb too." He froze. "You shouldn't have done that." "Ethan, please." "No, Mom." He stood up so suddenly his chair toppled over. "You don't understand." "Then help me," I cried. "Help me understand." He pressed his hands to his face, breathing hard. "It was supposed to be a joke," he whispered. "Just a prank. We didn't mean for anyone to get hurt." My heart dropped. "What kind of prank?" He shook his head, tears spilling now. "We heard about that old shack. People said weird things happened there. We wanted to record it, make a video. Caleb thought it'd go viral. We didn't know someone was living there." "Someone?" He nodded, trembling. "A man. He came out of nowhere, screaming, chasing us." Caleb tripped. He fell into the quarry. I covered my mouth, gasping. "I tried to get him out, Mom, I swear. But it was dark. I slipped. He was gone before I could reach him." He sank to the floor, sobbing. "I called it in, but they didn't believe me. They thought we were just stupid kids. I didn't even know the man's name. And then, when I went back later, the shack was empty, like he'd never been there." I knelt beside him, wrapping my arms around his shaking frame. "You should have told me, baby. I thought if I did, you'd look at me different, like I was a monster." I pulled him closer, my voice breaking. "You're my son. I could never stop loving you." We stayed like that for a long time, a mother and her broken boy, trying to hold the pieces of their world together. When he finally looked up, his eyes were swollen, but there was something new in them, relief. "He buried his things," he admitted quietly. "His phone, his wallet, I couldn't look at them anymore." "That's what I found," I said softly. He nodded. "I wanted to make it right. I just didn't know how." That night, after he'd gone to bed, I sat in the living room holding the photo of the two boys. I thought of Caleb's mother, her trembling hands, her empty house. I thought of the man in the woods, a ghostly shadow that had haunted both our sons. And I thought of my own child, carrying guilt heavier than any 16-year-old should. Sometimes, love isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about sitting beside the wreckage, holding the one who caused it, and whispering, "You're still mine." I didn't know what would happen next, whether the police would reopen the case,
whether that strange man in the woods would ever be found. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to lose my son again. Not to fear, not to silence, because now I'd seen the truth he tried to bury, and I wasn't afraid to dig it back up. When the police car pulled away from our driveway, the flashing lights leaving streaks of red across the night, I felt like my world had finally gone silent. Not peaceful, no, just empty. Like every sound, every heartbeat had been sucked out of me. The detective's last words echoed in my mind. "Ma'am, your son's safe, but what we found might change things for you. Change things." Those words kept replaying in my head as I stood in his room later that night, the same room where I'd once read him bedtime stories, the same room that now smelled of dust, stale sweat, and regret. Beneath his bed, I had found the box, the same one that started this storm, the one filled with secrets no mother should ever have to discover. Inside were letters, photos, a voice recorder, and a folded piece of paper that wasn't dusty like the rest, meaning he'd opened it recently. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. It wasn't just some scrap. It was a letter from his father.
"Son, I don't know if your mother ever told you the truth about me." That first line punched the air out of my lungs. My husband, my late husband, had written it years before he died. He'd never shown it to me, never even mentioned it existed. And yet here it was, hidden under my son's bed, along with everything else he had been burying. I made mistakes. I left debts. I left promises unkept. And I left my mother to deal with things no woman should face alone. My throat closed up. He had always been the charming one, the one who smiled through the storm. I never told my children how bad things got near the end, how the bills piled up, how I found second jobs just to keep food on the table, how he started drinking to escape the mess he'd created. But apparently, my son had found out. The next morning, I drove to the small park where the police had said they'd found him. He was sitting there now, on that same bench, hood pulled up, eyes dark with exhaustion and shame. When he saw me, he didn't flinch. He didn't even stand up. "I didn't mean for you to find the box," he muttered. "I didn't mean for you to disappear," I whispered back. We sat there in silence, the cool air biting at our faces. He finally broke. "I just wanted to understand him, Dad. You always made him sound like he was trying his best, but that letter, those pictures, it showed something else. He wasn't just struggling. He was running from debt, from people, from the truth." I swallowed hard. "He was, but he loved you. That was real." He looked away, his voice trembling. "He loved us, but he lied to us. And I guess I did the same to you." He told me everything then, about the people he'd been meeting, trying to pay off his father's old debts with what little money he had, the threats, the pressure, the guilt that had eaten away at him. "I thought if I fixed it, you'd never have to know," he said. "That's why I disappeared." There's a strange thing about motherhood. You raise your children to be honest, to be kind, to never hide things from you. But you also spend half your life hiding your own pain from them. I'd done that for years. And in that moment, sitting on that bench, I realized he was just doing what I had always done, trying to protect the family in his own way. Only secrets have a way of growing heavier when shared in silence. We went home that evening. The house felt different.
Not haunted anymore, but raw and open. We sat in the living room, in the same spot where we used to watch movies when he was a boy, his head resting on my shoulder, his laughter filling the air. He was quiet now, older, and yet, as I looked at him, I saw both the man and the little boy inside him. The one who used to ask, "Mom, are monsters real?" I wanted to tell him that the monsters were in closets or under beds. They lived in our regrets, our fears, our silence, and we had faced them together. Later that night, I opened the old photo album he'd hidden away. There were pictures of his father holding him as a baby and me standing behind them, smiling. I remembered that day vividly. It was the same week we lost our house, the same week I'd almost left. Funny how photos capture the smiles, but never the truth behind them. I looked at my son sitting across from me, his eyes soft but tired. "What are we going to do with the box?" I asked. He thought for a moment before answering. "Maybe we keep it, not as a secret this time, but as a reminder." I nodded and asked, "A reminder of what?" He looked at me quietly and said, "That sometimes the truth hurts less than the lies meant to protect us." In the days that followed, we talked more, really talked, for the first time in years. He told me about his fears, his guilt, and how he thought disappearing would make things easier. I told him about the years I spent pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. And somehow through those cracks, something new began to grow. Understanding. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was the beginning of it. Because forgiveness, I've learned, isn't a single act. It's a choice you make every day. To remember but not resent, to acknowledge the pain but not let it own you. Weeks later, we buried the box in the backyard. Together this time. No more secrets under the bed, no more lies pretending to protect, just truth. Finally, laid to rest. As we covered it with dirt, I whispered, "You can't change what's buried, but you can choose what grows over it." He smiled faintly, eyes glistening. "Maybe we plant something here, something new." And so we did. A rose bush. Because sometimes the most painful roots still give rise to something beautiful if you let them. When I look back now, I realize that the night my son disappeared was not the night I lost him. It was the night I began to truly understand him. For years, I believed that being a good mother meant keeping my children safe from every truth that could hurt them. I built walls of comfort, soft lies, and gentle stories, thinking they would protect their innocence. But those walls didn't keep the pain out. They only kept us apart. That box under his bed wasn't just a collection of secrets. It was a mirror, a reflection of everything we both had hidden. His shame, my silence, our shared fear of breaking the illusion that we were fine. When he ran away, I thought I'd failed as a mother. But maybe that moment, the fear, the heartbreak, the discovery, was the breaking we both needed. Because sometimes love isn't about shielding the ones you love from the truth. Sometimes it's about standing with them while they face it. In the weeks after everything settled, our home slowly changed. The shadows didn't disappear overnight, but they began to soften. Dinner conversations grew longer, and the silence between us wasn't cold anymore. It was healing. I started finding small notes from him around the house. Not apologies, but promises. "Dinner's on me tonight. Don't wait up, Mom. I'm safe. Love you." Each one felt like a thread stitching us back together, piece by fragile piece. The rose bush we planted bloomed not long after, vibrant, defiant, alive. I used to think it was just the symbol of closure, but now when I see those petals glistening with morning dew, I see something more. A reminder that pain, when faced and understood, doesn't destroy, it transforms. Sometimes we think we know our children, their smiles, their habits, their secrets, But children grow, and their worlds expand into places we can't always follow. What matters is not that we know every detail of their journey, but that they know we will always be there when the road brings them home. If I could speak to that frightened version of myself, the one who searched through her son's empty room, terrified of what she'd find, I tell her this: don't fear the truth. Fear the silence that keeps it buried. Because the truth, no matter how painful, has a strange kind of grace. It doesn't just reveal what's broken, it shows what's worth rebuilding. And in that rebuilding, love becomes something deeper, stronger, and finally, real. If this story touched your heart, don't leave just yet. Stories like these remind us that behind every closed door, every silence, and every secret, there's a lesson waiting to be found. If you felt the weight of this journey, the pain, the healing, the hope, then take a moment to subscribe to Grandma's Silent Truths. Your support helps us share more stories that heal, inspire, and remind us of what family truly means. Leave a comment below and tell me, what would you have done if you found a box of secrets under your child's bed? And don't forget to turn on the bell. The next story will stay with you long after it ends.